Hey, welcome back. I'm so glad to get to see you. Today, we are going to discuss how to find the information. Let's turn that off. So, how to find information when you're moving to an area or you're moving within an area and you're saying, hey, you know what? I want to know about the crime, especially everybody wants to know about the crime and they want to know about the schools. And so, uh, get rid of that. So let's talk about how you find this information out. So one of the first things that everybody asks when they want to move to an area is they want to know what is the crime like. And if you've watched my other videos, you know that in real estate, we are not allowed to have an opinion on crime. And that's because if you say, well, I want a safe neighborhood. And so what is a safe neighborhood to you? Because safe to me and safe to you and safe to the next person are going to be completely different, especially on what your upbringing is. For example, I was in Dallas, Texas, and I was in an area that didn't really, there were some homeless people around. I didn't see that that was an issue, but for a friend that I was with, it was really very traumatizing for them based on something that had happened in their life. So we're not allowed to say, like, what is safe. What you want to do is find out where do you get the information on so you can determine what's safe for you. I recommend you always go to the city and the county, and because you're not gonna just be on the spot at all times, so there's sometimes you're gonna wanna go to a restaurant, or you're gonna wanna go to a game or a movie, and as you're coming through the community, you wanna know, like, are there areas that you're not gonna be comfortable in? They may be safe areas to other people, but they're not gonna be where you would want to hang out. So if you go to the city of the area that you go to and you call them and you say, "Hey, listen, is it on your website, or do I need to put in a request to you to get the reports on what the statistical data is for crime in the area?" The city and the county will send you that information, or they will have it on their website. So it will determine on how they do their information. I sit on a couple HOA boards, and we always get the crime reports for our area just to know what's going on, if there anything happening in our community that we may not be aware of. And they will tell you the kind of crime that's going on. And every place has crime. There is no perfect place in the world. It all has crime. But it depends on the kind of crime. If you're in an area where very affluent, the crime might be, theft. There might be some petty theft in there, some breaking in cars and stealing sunglasses off of the seat. You may be in an area where there's a lot of maybe drug, be a lot of violence or vandalism. There was a community, very, very quiet community, Airbnb, and suddenly for the first time in that community's existence, they actually had a night event because 2 people got into a fight at the rental property. So not something you would normally see, but you also wanna see that how often is this happening? Is this like the Friday night occurrence? Is this what you do for fun on Friday night? Or is this just like a one-off situation? And do remember, get a hold of the city and county. Look at the area that you are gonna choose to live in, as well as maybe commute through to get to work or any kind of activities like grocery shopping, your Pilates class, your pickleball class, your dog walking, so you know if you're gonna be comfortable in that area or if you decide that you wanna be further away from whatever that crime is. And so the next thing is the school makeup. Again, I would always go to the county school board, and I would get that information, but also I like the site, best it's called greatschools.org, and that is a really, really good site that I like to use on getting school information. I'm on it right now, and I mean, it's very thorough. I still wouldn't trust it. I mean, I do trust it, obviously, I'm on it, but I still would rather go to the source. Nobody is gonna know the school system better and what is going on than the local school board, and there's gonna be things that you're gonna be able to get from them that you're not gonna get on any random site where you just type in the city and it pops up some information. So when you're talking to the school board, you'll be able to find out things that you won't see here, like what time are the bus and pick up and drop off? How many kids in general are getting on or off the bus. Now, why is that important to know? Maybe if there's 20 kids at the bus stop and there's 6 moms that are always hanging out, you might be a little bit more comfortable leaving your child at that bus stop if you need to get to school, or same thing, I mean, I'm sorry, school or work. But same thing if they're getting off of the bus, if they've got a lot of kids that are also getting off the bus, you may feel more peace than if your child was the only kid getting on or off of that bus, and maybe wanna hang out until the bus got there. So, they will be able to give you that information. Um, Other informations that you are going to wanna know is we always want to know, has the seller of a property pulled a permit for the work that they've done? Every county, every city has different requirements on what is required for permitting. Uh, One of the things that's required here is if you're going to do like an exterior door, you need to make sure it's permitted because it will make sure that it is going to withstand hurricane force winds in there. So they will want to have a look at that. Anything that's usually gonna involve some sort of big electrical or big plumbing is gonna need to have a permit. Today we were discussing a situation where a seller, the square feet on the property appraiser's website was, let's say, 1,300 square feet. But the seller said, "But my house is actually 1,500 square feet," and that does make a difference. So we were like, "All right, well, where's that extra 200 square feet that's not on the property appraiser's website?" And they said, "Well, I took this room and I put on a mini split in there, and I went ahead and heated and cooled the room." That's completely fine. The question was it permitted? Because if it's not permitted, this is going to be a problem for a lot of people. So let's go through what happens in that. It's going to be a problem possibly for the buyer, because if it's not permitted and the city or county find out after the closing, the buyer is going to be responsible for making it to code and correcting everything, which may be a small expense, but it also could be a very large expense as well. It can be a problem for the seller during the sale, and we were looking at it this way. We were seeing that the price per square foot in that area was, let's say, $200 per square foot. So if we use $200 times, um, 1,300 square feet, we come up with a $260,000 home, okay? Now, but they said, "Wait a second, my home is 1,500 square feet, so we're missing 200 square feet times $200 is $40,000." See that's a big number in there. So making sure that the permit was pulled, and then it was updated on the city or county website to say that, "No, this is actually a 1,500 square foot home." Yes, the seller might have been thinking, "Oh, you know what? They didn't catch what I did, and so I don't have to pay the property taxes on it," which is true, but then it's also hard to get you the value during the sale because it doesn't match the county records. And then when the appraiser comes in and says, "Well, wait a second, the records state that this was never permitted, so I can't give you the full value of this additional space because it wasn't permitted, and I can't really count it in my information because it's not on the public records," then you can have your property undervalued, or you might lose a buyer because they do not want to take on the risk of purchasing a property where the permits were not pulled, and they will ultimately be responsible for taking care of any issues that may result from the county or city finding out that the permits were not pulled, and then the buyer is gonna be forced to correct them. Now, there are some people who don't care, they're totally fine with it, and they're like, "Okay, it's not an issue at all." But there are some people who've had some bad situations happen when permits weren't pulled. So, if you were one of those people that have had a bad situation where you purchased a property and the permits weren't pulled, definitely please put them in the comments. I would love to see or hear about what you struggled with. I purchased a property that didn't have the permits pulled. They were, they had a screened porch. It was 10 feet by 30 feet. So it's it's 300 square feet, that's a very, very large space, and I knew buying it that there could be a situation in the future where they determined that the permits weren't pulled, they found out, and they would have to come out and inspect it, make sure that everything was the code, and if there wasn't, I would be the one who'd be responsible for it, and when they say code, they don't mean code when it was built, because they don't know when it was built because they were never told. They mean code from today's standards. So I've heard where people have had to completely take down part of their building and then reconstruct it. And then I've heard people that just got a slap on the wrist for a fine and they had to make some adjustments to bring it to code, but you don't know. So if you're the buyer, you absolutely wanna make sure that the permits were pulled and they were properly closed out, and you can do that by contacting the city or the county, giving them the address, and then they'll do the research for you and let you know if there are any outstanding permits. Now, there are service providers, like title offices will do this for you, but they do have a disclaimer on there saying that they're doing the best they can, and they can't be responsible because some records were not implemented. They were so long ago, and they have them, but they haven't finished putting them all into the computer system. So they can't be responsible for something that hasn't been yet put into the computer system. You would run into the same situation. So while you may pay someone else to do it, I would say be cautious and also do your own due diligence. No one is gonna care as much as you do about making sure that any permits that need to be pulled were pulled. Um, Also, don't this is something that's just a pet peeve of mine. When you're buying a property and the seller of that property is telling you, "Don't worry about it, all the permits were taken care of, you don't need to worry about that." Get me the information. If you've done work recently, then hopefully you've got the paid receipts for the work, you know, the vendors who did it, so you can give me their information. So once we close, that there's not gonna be an issue, and if there is an issue, I can contact them and say, "Hey, you just recently installed the water heater, and can you come back here and take care of it because there's a problem with it." Water heaters are something in our county that you do have to pull a permit for, but most people do not pull a permit for the water heater. So definitely do your due diligence because ultimately you as the buyer at the end of the day are gonna be responsible if that permit was or was not pulled and if that permit was closed out. And closing out permits sometimes are a real pain. I, work in property management, and many times when we have work that has to be done, just trying to get that permit closed out has taken months to get it done, and if it's taking months when it's being done right now, imagine what it's gonna take when you're 3 years or 20 years later and you're like, "They didn't close that permit out." So make sure you do your research for the permits on there. A next question that we get a lot of is they wanna know about the area, and they mean more than just, like, the crime, because we've already talked about crime, and they wanna know more about the schools, but they wanna know questions that we can't answer, like, "How many kids live here?" "Are my people here?" I don't know who your people are, but I don't know. "What is the age of everybody? What time do they go to school? Are there a lot of parties?" Let's take a step back and let's think about that. Unless I live in the area, I probably don't know. And I honestly don't even know what's going on in my area because I work so much, I'm rarely home. So if there's a party going on, I'm missing it because I'm here at work. So how do you find that information out? Well, one is if you're interested in area, I would say contact the homeowners association. If you get a hold of, like, the board president or somebody on the board whose job it is to keep up with what's going on, those people talk. Absolutely find out when the next meeting is and show up at that next meeting, and you're gonna get to find out a lot of information on that one community. If they have, like, a Facebook group or something that you can join and you can get in there and then find out a little bit more about that area, I would absolutely do that. I live in a community, we do not have an HOA, but we have a very, very active Facebook group, and I will tell you, like, nobody's business in this community is private. Everybody's business is online. Uh, so that is a great place to find information out about the community. It's gonna definitely be social media. It's gonna be looking at any communications from the homeowners association and the minutes of their meetings, and I would go back if you can, I'd go back like 2 years because sometimes a issue will die off, but it will be revitalized at the next annual renewal. One of the associations that I have is one thing that always comes up is painting a sign at the front. Always comes up, and that comes up once a year, but what comes up every month is, this one person feels like certain people don't keep up with their homes as much as they should. Now, the rest of us don't care, she does, but that's kind of good information because in there it says what this person's opinion is of not keeping up with their home as much as they should. So it's a great way to find out what's going on in the community. So Facebook is a great way, social media, the homeowners association is a great way as well. Another way to find out the makeup of an area, honestly, is going to be Google. And that when I say makeup in this way, I say makeup in the sense of um, you go to Google and you're looking at like home prices, you can find the makeup of the area in home prices just by looking at like realtor.com or Zillow, and it will tell you what that activity is. Is there a lot of turnover in that area? Is there not a lot of turnover? How long are those houses sitting in the market? And then you can go, okay, well, if there's a lot of turnover, why? Is this a good turnover in the sense that they are selling the properties because in our area, that community happens to be associated with the school and people are graduating and that's a good thing? Or is there a lot of turnover because the community is going down and people are trying to get out because maybe they're gonna build a power plant next to the subdivision and everybody wants to move out of the subdivision. So it's a great way to find that information out. And as far as Google goes, I also just Google, new development or new business news to find out what is happening. And it will tell you if there is a new development. Like in one area where we have a house for sale for someone, they have decided to sell because a builder is coming in and they are putting in tens of thousands of homes around her house. And she was like, "No, no, I do not want to live here." Now, somebody may not care, she cares. And so to find out what kind of development is going on, if it's coming in or if it's leaving will be important to know. And you're gonna get that from, doing a Google search on the news. And also, you can find that out from the permitting or the zoning department. So if you contact the city or county zoning department and you say, "Hey, this is where I'm at. Can you tell me, are there any applications that have been made, not approved, but what applications have been made?" And they will talk to you about it, or they'll tell you where to go on the site to see what applications are pending. They will also have on there what applications are approved. So, there was an area that a lot of residents got upset because an application was in for a car wash. Everybody loves a car wash as long as it's not around your property. So, just because the application was put in didn't mean that it got approved, it actually didn't, but it did cause an uproar, and if you like car washes and you wanna be close to one, then you probably wanna live there. But if you found out that that car wash was gonna be, like the building, if it was gonna be 2 or 3 stories high and its lights were gonna be really, really bright and shining into your property, that would be something that you wanna know, and you will find that out by contacting the city or the county. They usually have a website that tells you what permits are being applied for, and then when the hearing and the minutes are gonna be, as well as what it will take for them to get approved, and, when it will be approved, we'll know what is going in around the area. Now, another thing on makeup of the area, as far as Google goes, it's really easy, is you just look at the map, and I always tell people this, if you wanna know if an area is coming up or if it's declining, is when you look at the map, look at the kind of businesses that are around that area. If you see that, um, there's a lot of name brand businesses. Let's say there's a Dunkin' Donut that leads to a different type of customer base versus a Starbucks. If you see that there's a McDonald's versus a four-star restaurant, then you're gonna start to see what the demographics of that area is. When you see an area where the gas station is, Mary and Tom versus Exxon or Wawa or Cumberland, you're gonna know what the makeup of the community is because as it's being built up, you're gonna start to see those higher end stores and, franchises, and when it's on a decline, you're gonna start to see them transition into, like, mom and pop or very, very local businesses. That doesn't mean that it's a bad business because it's a mom and pop, but it does mean that the area is changing again, and that's a good indication to know, like, is it coming up and you wanna get in on the ground floor and go ahead and buy a property now while you still can, or do you probably wanna do you wanna sell? Because everybody, instead of living on this side of town, is now wanting to live on this side of town, or they're moving from the north side to the south side, something like that, or they're moving from Miami to Gainesville. So it will tell you what is going on, and all of that is gonna be either on a website or property appraiser's site. Another good place for information is the property appraiser site, and every county has their own property appraiser site, and I just Google, like, I find out what the name of the county is, like Marion County, and I go to the property appraiser's website, and it is a wealth of knowledge. You can find the past sales in there, of course, the property taxes. You can find when it's changed hands, if it was through a sale or like a quitclaim deed, you can see all of the deeds. Many times they'll have links to what the property taxes are and if they've been paid. So it will even give you information like how many homes are in the community, how many sales have happened in that community. So a great wealth of information is there. It does take a little bit of digging. If you've got a good real estate agent, they should be able to help you find this information. Again, I don't believe in trusting all of this to a person and then making them responsible and saying, "Oh, you didn't find out all the information. You're to blame." Because when you're going down this rabbit hole and you're reading something and you're saying, "Okay, the schools are this," it prompts you to ask other questions. And as you ask other questions, you're gonna get information that you wouldn't have had if you had somebody finding that information for you because they don't know everything that's important to you. So they didn't think that there was gonna be an issue and they didn't ask. And now you're like, "Oh, man, I really, really wish I would have known that." Also on the county and, city websites is you're going to be able to find the HOA documents and the condo documents. Um, some communities are going through a revitalization, and they are updating their documents, so the ones that are being given to you may have been current 30 years ago, but they're not gonna be current today, possibly, and what you're reading is old news, and so let me give you an example of one of those. When many communities were developed, short-term rentals did not exist. They didn't. So there was nothing in those documents regarding short-term rentals. And so many people, when they purchased a home, they knew that there was nothing prohibiting them from doing a short-term rental, so they put one in. Now, of course, the homeowners were upset. They were like, "Oh, what do we want live next live to a short-term rental?" But there was nothing to be done about it because it didn't exist. Now, some communities decided to get together and change the documents and no longer allow short-term rentals. So if you're going off of a document that someone gave you that is not up to date because you didn't go online or you didn't get a hold of the homeowners association and say, "Hey, give me the minutes of the last meetings for the last 2 years and find out what changes have occurred," you might be buying into an area where you're like, "Oh, hey, that information current, I'm sure it is. I can go ahead and buy this and put it in my short-term rental," only to find out that you can't. So and it's not just the HOA documents and kind of documents that you're looking for, you're also looking for the deed restrictions because the city or county may have a certain set of rules that, are not in the HOA documents because they may have their own rules. So, for example, the city may say chickens are fine. Please, by all means, have chickens in your yard, as many as you want. But the HOA may say, "Not in our neighborhood." So you wanna make sure that you understand what the HOA documents are as well as what the city and county documents are. So real life example on that one is, our government has decided to approve additional dwelling units, ADUs. And so there's a lot of rules and restrictions that go in there, but if you qualify, you can put an additional unit on your property. Sounds fantastic. And so we had somebody in our community decide that they were just gonna throw up a mobile home on the property because the city said that you could. Our documents state that you can't. You can't do that. And so now there's a situation that we're in where we're having to have them remove the additional dwelling that they put in. And see, that goes back to that permitting. Was it done? They probably did pull all the right permits, but they didn't check every single place that they needed to make sure what they were doing was okay. Saying, "I didn't know," saying, "Somebody didn't give me the documents," saying that it's not my fault, it's their fault, it's not gonna help you, because at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. You're informed of all of the information, and if you're not, then that's gonna be on you. So even if somebody's handing you something and they're saying that it is true, I would double check it. It's not gonna hurt to double check it. It's gonna take a little bit of time, yes, but it's not gonna hurt you to double check it and have that information. What's gonna hurt is when you buy a property that you can't do with it what you wanted to do, what's gonna cost you a lot of money that you didn't plan for or you just may not even have because you didn't do this little bit of research to find out the crime rates, what the permits are, if they were taken care of, what the schools are and what they're rated, and what is the makeup of the area. Um, Another good way to find out the makeup of the area is if you're able is to drive by. And I understand not everybody is able to do that because you may be out of state. But if you are able to come for a visit and you're able to drive by, I always recommend driving by at different times of the day. You know, nights and weekends, during the busy hours of the week. I just had some out of town clients that they came in on a Saturday. They wanted to see what the community was gonna be like on a Saturday. They wanted to walk the community and they wanted to stop people on the street, and they did. We spent 3 days together and they did talk to everybody and they stopped them and they asked them how they liked the community, was there anything they would change, how long they lived there, and then they made sure they stayed over into the weekday because they wanted to see what was the traffic pattern gonna be like when they went to work. How was it getting in and out of the neighborhood? Were people speeding and going crazy, or were they really, really, nice to each other? They also saw what the parking situation was like for them. They did not want a community where everybody was parking all over the grass and there was like 10 cars in the front of the yards. And it allowed them to be able to see that in certain sections, the house was like 5 a bedroom house, and when it was only had like a 2-car garage. There's, like, no additional space for parking, so people were forced to have to park kind of in their yard or, kind of populate the street because it wasn't designed well to handle that many cars living there, and so that they quickly found out that that was not gonna be the place for them, but that's the kind of research that you're gonna wanna do before you move in. Now, what happens if you can't come beforehand? Google Earth is a good thing, but also having a real estate agent that would be willing to drive the area for you at different times and say, "Hey, I'm driving by on a Saturday at 5 o'clock, and this is what it looks like." That's very, very helpful. I literally just did that yesterday. I have a client that's moving to the area from Portugal. They don't know anything about the area, and it's overwhelming. So what I did is because I need it anyway, is I went ahead and just drove through the area, and I mean, my driving was that I literally stuck my arm out the window, not to the point it was gonna get cut off, okay? Obviously, I still have my arm, but I did stick it out the window, and I just videotaped what the houses looked like and what the traffic was like, and even for me, I learned something in this one area learned because we were in the villages, I learned that there were certain parts of the villages where the golf carts were off of the main road and they were able to travel safely, and then other areas, they shared the road with the cars and they're trying to turn left. It was kind of a little bit of a nightmare, and I was really scared for them. So that kind of information you might wanna know, and if you're not able to come visit, hopefully you'll have a real estate agent that will do that for you, or there will be videos on YouTube that you will be able to see, like, what's it like to drive through the area. There's really a lot of videos out there where people are like, "Spend the day with me in," and they've got a city, and then you can just see what's going on in the background and find out a little bit more about what that town is like. So hopefully I have answered all of the questions on where do you get this information. If I have not answered all of your questions, please send me a text, a DM, call me, email me, whatever is gonna be best for you, and let me know what questions you have. A lot of people have those questions too, and I can make it into the next video. Um, if you wanna talk privately, we can absolutely talk privately. So if it's made you think of something that I didn't even think of, please share it with me. I'm always looking for good content, and I look forward to seeing you next week on the next call. Have a great day.